resource. We coordinate them with where to go, which is just that support, that tribe mentality that we have to try to comfort the veterans that are, they may be transitioning from active duty back to the civilian sector, or that they may just be going through a difficult time, and we just kind of wrap our arms around them and support them the best we can.
You kind of facilitate them
Yes.
and connecting them with existing resources in the community.
Facilitate, yes,
And you're like a peer support. I forgot what you called it before.
I'm a certified peer support specialist with the veteran stamp. My boss Brandon kind of gave me the title peer navigator. I'm also I'm a mentor with the Buncombe County Veterans Treatment Court. That's one of the other. That's probably probably my most gratifying role, working in the court system now.
It's been a long road to get there.
Absolutely.
And how long have you guys been married?
Actually, today's my wife's birthday. So
Is it really?
happy birthday!
Well, happy birthday, Julie. I would have had a cake, man.
That's okay.
Dang.
We've been together 6 years. How long have we been married for?
Yeah.
4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And is that first marriage, kind of?
That's my third.
Moving right along.
Yeah.
This is my third.
Yeah, we've both been married twice before.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. What's life like at home? Like, I see you guys like in the gym working out all the time, and really spending quality time with surrounding something that you both enjoy,
Sure.
and something that supports you both mentally, physically, and just your overall well-being. Like, what's the home life like? How do you control this man is what I'm getting
Go
at.
ahead, babe.
How do you keep him?
It's really not difficult. We enjoy the same things. We both like to keep things simple, so we don't really. I don't know. It's not challenging. We like to have fun, so we're constantly like cutting up, and we play with our little dog, and I don't know. We just relax, try to rejuvenate for the week, and then the gym is part of that.
We don't argue. I mean, I've learned to communicate through her. We don't argue. We don't really. We may have a tense moment here and there. I've learned to become a man through her. How to just work through situations that I used to would have ran from, or just say I'm to hell with it. I'm not going to talk about it. So communication. We have a healthy relationship, and the main, we believe in God, but communication is a big thing for us.
The few things that you hit on last time when you were like tooting her horn the whole time you're here. She got a lot of credit that night. But the two things that you hit on that night real strongly were communication and boundaries. Were the two things
yes.
that you talked about that you learned
through her
in this relationship.
Yes.
What was that process like?
It was difficult. I was talking to one of the guys I mentor today about when I began this transition, having somebody to set boundaries with me, teaching me how to communicate. Part of those boundaries was humbling, but it was brutal. Having somebody to tell me, hey, some of your behaviors aren't acceptable. This is the way you appear to other people, and it hurt, but it taught me how to grow. It helped me to become a better person. It gave me the avenues to work on myself. Mm-hmm. But it was a humbling experience for sure.
You talked about I've seen this redemption of Ricky Johnson, mm-hmm. right? And I talked about in the beginning about these videos, these just completely vulnerable, like brutally honest, yet like taking ownership of this experience, and kind of like I talked about with flexibility, but just like the way that you view these experiences and share that with the world, but the way you view these experiences is always from a point of view of like, what can I learn from this?
Sure.
What are my takeaways? How can I apply those takeaways to be a better man, in the next steps of my life or the next experience? How can I apply what I've learned and move forward with that? How did you get to that point where you like decided to start doing these videos?
Man, honestly,
because like before, the old Steve Steen, the old Ricky Johnson, like to get on camera in front of the world and like talk about your emotions and like how you're feeling with not just like somebody privately, but the entire world. That's a step of vulnerability. That's a leap. of vulnerability.
The first video I ever did, a lady from my hometown contacted me and she asked me would I kind of give her grandson some encouragement who was struggling. So I sat in front of an iPad and looked crazy, and it was horrible, but it came from my heart. And I decided to do another one and just speaking about my son's suicide. And when I made this video, I was seeing the impact it had on people, and having that, it gave me that sense of worth and value. People telling me, "Hey, keep doing this." And honestly, being so transparent and being so open about it with everybody, it gives me strength and momentum and leverage. It liberates me. I basically do it to let people know there's nothing you can say about me that I've not said about myself. And I also do it to let people know, no matter what you're going through, you're not the first, you're not the last, but you can be one of the few to come out of it. I want them to know I don't do this because I'm proud of it or ashamed, but I want to let them know that they're not the only one. And I don't expect people to be, tell the public about it, but I do that to let them see, hey, it's okay, that you've gone through this.
You can go on any social media app and pull up like inspirational videos or words of wisdom, and like you never know what you're gonna get, right? You're gonna get somebody trying to sell you something, or you're gonna get somebody that has their head up their ass and their ego patting themselves on the back, or their ego in the way. When you go to Ricky Johnson's videos, you get like you mentioned, Julie, at the beginning, you're going to get a sense of humility. And it's not like, look at me, look where I'm at, but it's like, this is what I've learned today.
Sure.
Let me share a little bit of that with you. This is how I learned it. It's definitely not out of greed or any sort of like self, look at me kind of deal. It's totally from a humility point of view.
I could get on social media and Facebook and I could say a lot of things that sound good and tell people what they want to hear and get millions of views. I know that. That's not who I am. I mean, I say things that somebody may not want to hear, but I even need to hear it at times.
That's how we grow. That's how as a human race and a society, we like learn from each other and we evolve, is through those like uncomfortable conversations. Sure. And like that's not natural. Like we don't naturally want to have those conversations.
Yeah, babe. There's sometimes I have to tell her, I'm like, she'll communicate with me, I'll call it, and I have to tell her, like, after I take a step back and I process what she's said to me, she's right. But I have to tell her, look, none of us like to be told, hey, you're wrong, or this is not acceptable. It hurts at first, and then you take a step back, and then I'm like, you know what, I see your point. So yeah.
It's definitely a skill that has to be like cultivated, and
oh yeah,
you have to high level of self-awareness as you're kind of like in the moment and going through the moment. But yet you do it like
Sure.
very well, Ricky. You do.
It took, and it's something I tell people now. If she would have told me in the beginning, the person that I used to be, she can tell you who I was. I was a very raw.
We're gonna get there. Don't worry.
Sure. If she would have told me in the beginning, it's going to take this much work for you to get from here to here, I couldn't have done it. It was just slow grooming, planting seeds. That's what it was. It's just she just would, let me vent, validate what I was going through, and let me work through it. I mean, even with my videos in the beginning, I'd speak on emotion a lot. And feeding into stuff, and I say, babe, I made this video, and she's like, do you really see how somebody could take you the wrong way? And I'm like, and I get offended at first, and I'm like, yeah, I can see that.
She's your best critic.
Absolutely.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Who's the Ricky Johnson that you met originally, and what type of growth have you seen in him?
It started out with just having a really low sense of self-value, When I met him, he was kind of coming out of that a little bit. He was really striving to do something different, and you could tell that. Like he really wanted to have a sincere change. But prior to that, just, seeing kind of that person beforehand, it was that person that sometimes we are in addiction, whenever we're struggling to really see the value in ourselves. So what's the point of trying? So, anything and everything is kind of open. And it only makes us feel worse about ourselves. So we're in that terrible cycle where we just keep reliving everything every day and wondering why it doesn't change, And I did see that in him for sure, but seeing that he was in that place of wanting so badly to get out of it and starting to be able to, he was reading scriptures at that time because he was in the mission that was faith-based. And so they were, even though they didn't really give him everything that he needed as far as his spirituality at the time. He kind of was challenged by some of the things they brought forth to him. He still would take it in, digest it. What can I learn from this? Just like you said. And so it was really about the growth of the situation, the growth of the experience. And that's what's brought him out of it.
How did you develop that skill to look at every experience from a point of view of what can I learn from this? Like what changed? What kind of shift in mindset, or what led up to that point?
I was
'Cause it's hard.
I think it was just I had hit the bottom. I mean, I hit bottom multiple times, but this last time I was tired and I was willing to do anything possible to be done with it and just make do something different. And I can't give you an exact moment, but it was just I was willing to do anything. I was absorbing everything that I could get just to to grow as a person.
Talk about that defining moment.
The defining moment was I was living it was kind of like a halfway house. It was jail, but you could go to work, and it was called the Community Supervision Center. And I couldn't stay sober in this facility, and the day that I was to go full time at this job, a factory I was working at, I had like a month to prepare for the urinalysis. I pissed dirty on the day I was to go full time, okay? And I'm walking out in tears. I'm like, I was like, I'm sick of this shit, man. I was done with it, and I was hurt. I was just a ton of emotion. So I go back to the facility and I talk to my probation officer, and I asked her, I said, do you truly care about me and my sobriety? And she said, yes. And I said, well, you got to get me the hell out of here. So that's when I ended up in this rescue mission. And it was just a small step up, from jail. It was, I got better food, I had a little bit more flexibility and, a better place to sleep. And it was just small steps that kind of got the ball rolling, and I had no clue I knew what I wanted, but I had no clue of how to get there. I mean, I was, my way of thinking was backwards. It was me against the system. And, I can say 100% with confidence, if I wouldn't have crossed paths with her, I'd still be in it. She just gave me that little bit of that hope that, there's I can do this. So
What did you see in him?
I could definitely see that he wasn't the person that he truly was. I could see the gentle person that cared about people, the humble person, the person that could be so sincerely valued if he would just allow people to do that for him, and he just needed to get the foundation, so that he could use that as a springboard to really take off into who he wanted to be, who he really is.
And Stephen, I can tell you something else I talked to Julie about this. My prior life, I was very manipulating, and that's the way I survived. So I learned how to read people very well, okay, in a bad way.
Yeah, which that's a sign of many people who have experienced substance use disorders.
Right.
And having that skill in my life now, it's taught me to be. It's taught me how to be very observant. It's been a great tool to me as far as when I speak to people or or speak with peers. My greatest asset is listening, and I may forget your face or I may forget your name, but I'll remember everything you told me because I pay attention for a reason, is to let people know that you matter and what you're telling me. I care about it. So,
what you guys first met? You were finishing that program?
I was homeless in the rescue mission, and that's when we crossed paths.
And what was your first impression of Ricky?
Arrogant, probably.
He was cocky for sure. I mean, he had a cockiness about him, you know.
Overcompensated.
He did. There was an overcompensating mask that he was wearing, most definitely. You know, and he struggled with, you know, wanting to be someone different and true to himself, and struggling to just protect himself, you know, to survive. And so he had developed this persona of surviving and this mask of surviving that wasn't him, but it was definitely a little bit crazy ghetto country kind of thing going
Ghetto
on.
country.
Yeah, it was kind of like what it was. So yeah, it was different, you know.
Yeah.
It definitely wasn't the guy you see sitting in front of you right now, for sure.
Yeah.
Good, there's no videos of that, huh?
It was bad. I look back. We talk about who I was when we met, and the way I talk. I still stutter, but I used to talk really fast. I was really just tense, a ball of nerves, just coming out of life of meth,
In prison.
and just all that comes with it. And I was just a real, I was trauma. Like I had a lot of trauma, from that. And I just I'm a totally different. The way I think, the way I speak. Everything about me is just, I'm a different person now. And it took a lot of work.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. I was like, how did you influence that change? Like, what steps did you take? Because that's drastic measures. Like that's
For one, I'll give her a lot of credit because she was that I was willing to do anything I could to be with her, and that meant changing the music I listened to, my environments. She pretty much let me know from the beginning, what you were doing before, that shit's not going to cut it now. And I took that serious. It was part of that boundaries and communication, and that's what got the ball rolling. I mean, just my behaviors that she would let me know that weren't acceptable. Like, this is how you appear, and I was just humble enough to, receive it and work on it.
How much time did you have? How much clean time did you have?
When we met, probably a few weeks.
Yeah.
I had 3 changes of clothes. I just started gaining some weight back. I had a little bit of confidence, just enough to talk to her, and I was still very new. To sobriety.
Yeah, I think because what I was getting at is like, you hear the myths of early recovery and relationships and
Yep.
stuff like that, and like for just as many of those like critics, there's just as many success stories.
And we talked about that the other day. I mean, it didn't dawn on me how scared she must have been to take a chance on me. Like I was this horrible in relationships, a ton of baggage, felonies. I'm still owed a lot of money in fines, and
But like you said, like we said earlier, though, looking at it from what is it that I can learn from this and take away from this, and she saw the potential.
Yeah.
And you looking at it, you see the baggage because of like the state of mind that you're in, and coming out of the fog and growing into the man that you are today. Looking back, it probably seemed like a lot of baggage, and if that's what you want to call it, it probably was. Yeah. But that's not what she saw when she,
Right.
not just when she interacts with you. She saw what you wanted.
Sure, absolutely. That's a good way of putting it.
Right? Because you knew what you wanted.
Yes.
You wanted to be happy. You wanted to be a man. You wanted to be in long-term recovery and grow spiritually and grow your faith and get this solid relationship. She saw what you wanted.
Sure. And we kept it simple. I mean, like you're saying, just simple. It's just good food. I mean, just
Ooh, baby.
just sleeping in a warm bed, not having to worry about warrants, the door getting kicked in. It was small things to me that meant everything to me at that time. Music, listening to music, just things that I'd neglected for so long, and things I had to worry about. I just didn't have to worry about it anymore. So
Let's take a step back and let's kind of dive into how you ended up there.
sure.
You're a veteran.
Yes, I'm a 5-year Marine veteran. Like I mentioned before, I'm also a mentor with the Buncombe County Veterans Treatment Court. I'm very open about my past and my childhood. I had good parents. My mother was a good woman, and my stepdad raised me. Okay, and my mother and my biological father, they made bad choices. Okay, they both died alcoholics. Growing up, I had a good childhood, but the truth is I was exposed to substance use as a kid, alcohol, and it appealed to me. And
did it, like, heavily drinking or like over intoxication became kind of acceptable behavior for you as a young
sure
person?
Yeah, yes, and
kind of normalized?
the thing, my mom didn't really, she didn't encourage it, but she didn't discourage it either. It was kind of accepted among, my families, both sides of my family.
How old are you?
I'm 39.
And out of the Midwest, right?
Yes.
Missouri?
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Do you think that 39?
Yes.
Do you think that a part of that is just kind of like, I don't know, generational?
Absolutely.
Like, because that's somewhat of what I recall as well.
Yes.
I'm 38 years old, almost 38, and that's like, it was just like drinking was like normalized. That's what we do on the weekends. We over intoxicate. We watch the ball games. We go on vacation. We go to these places, and that's like the behavior that's attached to anything that we do.
I mean, I can remember my dad, my biological dad, and like I said, guys, the bad choices I made, it's because I did it. But I can remember him. I can remember my dad taking me to bars at like 3 and 4 and 5 years old, and it was acceptable and it was fun to me. But looking back, it was very dysfunctional, because it impacted me. What the things that I was seeing and hearing, I never forgot it. And like I said, it didn't seem like a big deal to me, and obviously it took a huge toll on my life down the road. So,
at what point in your life did you experience consequences? Were you like casually and socially using prior to joining the Marines, or?
I drank casually before the Marine Corps. I done meth like once before the Marine Corps. My heavy substance use didn't get heavy until after the Marine Corps. I mean, I drank heavily from the time I was 21 until I discharged from the Marine Corps. But my first taste of actual consequence was in the Marine Corps. I got a DWI, and I was 21 then, so that was my first DWI.
And you got out of the Marine Corps after doing 5 years?
Yes, 4 years and 8 months.
And started using meth?
Yes.
What led up to that? Why?
I've talked to her about this. I don't know. I was just, I was curious. It was around me. I was just curious. I wanted to experiment with it, and it was like I said. If you know anything about Marines, we're very repetitive, obsessive. We're competitive people, and for me, add substance use into that mix. It was a perfect storm.
Watch out.
And I already had that. I had an obsessive personality, and that made that personality. It helped drive me to do some great things. But then you throw substance use into that with me, it wasn't good. And the first time I done meth, I loved it.
What kind of lifestyle were you living at that time? Were you like into fitness and things that you're into now, or?
I got out of the Marine Corps in decent shape, and I swore I'd never stop working out. And then I got into meth, and it kind of took it to it doesn't work like that. But it was a very toxic lifestyle.
So what led up to that defining moment that we talked about a little bit earlier?
As far as what?
It's like what happened? How did you get to that point where you're ready to change?
Like I tell a lot of people, something swift come through my life. I wasn't laying in bed one day and I woke up and thought, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. It was just something that kind of forced my hand. Like I need to do something different.
Yeah.
I lost everything. Literally, I lost everything multiple times. And this last time, I was just like, I'm sick of this.
And I think that's what I was trying to ask is like, why that time? What was different that time out of anything else that led up to that point? Her?
Yeah.
I think that from my perspective, what I saw in him is I think it's important for us to give a lot of credit to our faith and our beliefs, because one of the things for me that helped me not give in to the fear that might have been there just from the knowledge of him being early in recovery and potentials for disaster and all of those things that you read about and you hear. For me, it was that belief in my faith. You know, I had prayed and prayed for someone to come into my life with likenesses of my own, you know, and then when I met him, he was kind of going through that same thing. We're really trying to dig into his faith, prayer. He, you know, prior life of substance use, especially meth. That was my drug of choice at the time too, whenever I was in it. So it was just, you know, just seeing all of those things unfold, like, God, give me a sign. Next day you come in, there's your sign, you know. And it was just like so just obvious that unless you just wanted to completely turn your back and say, I'm not going to do this, I'm just going to let fear give in, it was just, you knew it was right, you know, there was no doubt. And so I think that's the biggest thing. But like, just from an outside looking in, peace is coming into place. Knowing what I know about recovery, the connection that we had, I think was a big thing, because connection's huge in recovery and helping you pull out of it. But then also the spiritual part of it, like all of those different pieces of recovery that we talk about, were really coming to place for him at the right time.
And, you know, I said a prayer, you know, when I got fired from that job, I prayed. I said, God, if you get me out of this pits of hell that I'm living in, I'll always give back to the next man. I never blame you when things don't go my way, and I'll always give you credit when I'm blessed. And I stood on that prayer, you know, and I was obviously, you know, my story, I was tested in a major way, but that's how that was. I pretty much just asked God, you know, guide me. I don't know what I'm doing. I really didn't. And my best way of thinking was proven to fail repeatedly. So I needed some guidance from somewhere. So
And you listened.
yeah, this time I did for sure.
What other social supports did you have in place? Or how did you?
Well, honestly, at this time of my life, I burned a lot of bridges, and I used to kind of say people would turn their back to me and all that, but the truth was they got sick of my shit, man. And it took me a while to accept that. But as far as support, you know, it took, you know, my dad and my stepdad who raised me, we're really close now, but it took a long time for us to get to that point. And my support was few and far between, honestly. I mean, it took my circle was small. My circle was still small, but it took a while to, you know, the support was limited, honestly.
Yeah. Mending relationships.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Making amends.
Mm-hmm.
What was that process like? How did you get to that point where?
Well, I had a guy tell me at the VA one time that I really respected. He's an older gentleman. He said, Ricky, the best way to get to change people's minds of you is your current behavior, you know. And I never forgot that. And it was you know, there's some people, I have family that still don't speak to me, and other people that stopped talking to me when I started gaining some success. There was people that stopped talking to me. Mending relationships. I done apologies didn't have any value to me anymore. I did it so many times. It was a long process. It was just a lot of you know, social media helped me a lot, because they could actually see my words were matching what I was doing, you know, through pictures and things like that. My actions.
I think one of the things that I've learned that's just so important is that, like, you hit on it, is my actions, the way that I'm living today.
Yep.
However, it's still up to the individual as to when they are ready to allow me to regain some of that trust or get back to that point. And that even though, like, my mind and my ego wants me, like, hey, I've done all this stuff. Look at all the things that I've done. I've done all these things.
Yep.
Come on, give me a chance. And it can be frustrating, but it's not up to me.
Sure.
Right? The only thing that's up to me is my actions and my behaviors and the way that I live. And those are going to fall in line with my goals and my intentions. And I'm going to live this way, whether the camera's on me or whether I'm walking through the grocery store across the street at Walmart. I'm going to be that person that I say that I am. But it's up to the other person.
Absolutely. And I tell people, you know, a lot of guys I talk to are individuals. I'm like, hey, man, there's some people that's not going to forgive you, and they have that right. And I've had to accept that about, you know, there's people that they've not forgiven me, but it was my fault. I had it coming, and it's sad, but I mean, I've accepted that this may be the way it's going to be forever, you know.
You talk a lot in your videos, in private conversations with me, about taking responsibility for your actions.
Sure.
And that's something that many folks in recovery really struggle with.
Yeah.
Really like that deep, long, honest look in the mirror, and taking a look at like not just my actions, but how my actions affected other people, and what type of harm did I truly cause, and what were my underlying intentions behind why I did whatever it is that I did.
Yeah.
You do that. You own it.
Yeah.
How did you learn that? Like, how? Just so many things that like you just.
You know, even in my prior life, I wasn't too big on. I mean, I didn't make excuses, and I wouldn't. If I did something, I owned it. Okay. I was never one to say, "Well, I did this because so and so did this," and that's something I kind of it kind of carried over. Babe, you can give a better explanation than me as far as me taking ownership of it.
I think the biggest piece of it was probably feeling like you could do that and it was safe to do that.
Yeah.
Like it was safe to feel, you know, and then experiencing that over and over and over again so that it becomes like safe to just have emotion. It's like when we're in our addiction, active addiction, what do? We avoid. Screw having emotion, man.
Numb out.
I'm gone, you know? So anything and everything to numb. And once he started saying, you know, I can feel sad, I can feel, you know, I can feel happy, I can feel true joy, but I have to feel all of those things in order to feel true joy. Then that's,
And I think
it was healing.
Stephen, the question you asked me, a lot of it was I would look at people that were making a lot of excuses, pointing fingers at other people, and they would continue to play a victim. I knew how I viewed them, and I didn't want to be viewed the same way.
Gotcha.
You know, and I was like I said, owning things I've done, it liberates me. I can just breathe, and there's nothing you can look at me and say, well, you did this, and you didn't. Yeah, I probably did do it. I mean, so
Really empowering.
It is. You talked about like just that fear of feeling. I learned that skill through meditation. And, you know, it started out with like mindfulness meditation, just focusing on your breath, right? Just in and out, in and out, in and out.
Right.
Wander off, come back, in and out, wander off. And then, you know, they take it to the next step of like body, mind and body, breath and body. And it's like, I can vividly remember like the meditation instructions in treatment, and in some of the videos and stuff that I would do, and it was like, notice the sensations in your body, notice what it feels like. And I couldn't feel nothing. I was like, it was all foreign to me, and I just could not like pinpoint. A lot of it was like, it was the feeling tone of the experience. So they would be like, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Do you feel a sensation in your body? And then label it pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And like everything was neutral because I couldn't identify what it felt like. It was years, 2 years before I could really like notice things. And now that I've practiced this for so long, I don't have to be in meditation to experience something in my body, to experience a shift or a subtle change in the way that I experience these emotions, kind of like physically. And but it took like a lot of work, and I just remember like, I don't know what it feels like. Feel what?
You know, I do presentations, and I still speak, and I give every time I do these presentations or speak, I relive I tell my story, and I relive a lot of traumatic stuff. And there's still times, man, I got to stop in mid-sentence and just I may start crying, and you know, in front of people, or I have to recompose to catch my breath, man, because it just hits me all of a sudden, and you know, I still get emotional.
But that's the difference today, is that like you're okay with that.
Yeah.
Right? Like we're okay with having this difficult conversation with strangers, right? And like Julie said, like in the past we would have run from it, hid from it, like at all costs. Survival. Survival mode. And that's just, it's such an amazing way to live, right? It's so liberating. to be able to do that and share that experience with others. And you can see like when they receive it, right? Like you talked about like being aware of when you're talking to individuals and kind of being able to read them and like to see like the wheels turning and to see like the impact that that you've made when you do those pitches and those presentations. How has your arrest record
Sure.
affected the way that you live today?
Oh, it's affected it tremendously. You know, I have 2 felony convictions, one for DWIs, one for methamphetamine. And I try to tell people, you know, when you get that drug felony on your record, you know, the games are over. It's affected the renting places. It's affected, you know, getting jobs. I'm blessed with the job that I have now, and it didn't happen overnight. It wasn't, you know, it took a lot of work. It was networking. It was, I was determined when I caught these 2 this felony, the meth charge and the DWI felony. I was determined not to let those define me or dictate my life. And it was something. This is my goal. If you see me on paper, I don't match who you meet, and that's been my goal everything I do. And it doesn't always work out that way. I mean, I've applied for jobs before I met Brandon, at the Outlet Mall, at Under Armour, and at Nike. No calls back.
And nowadays with the tech world, you can't even get that face-to-face chance to sell yourself.
No.
And I think that's what's so huge with some of the advocacy stuff that's taking place these days is like the ban the box, things like that, that'll just get you in the door just to have that conversation. But at the same time, like there's still barriers in place on like the corporate level, right? Like I've told this story before that I worked this little retail job and like I part-time supervisor at this little department store downtown, and my boss is a huge recovery ally. She supports the work that we do here, and she like gives me off any day I need to have for special events and things like that. Anytime I need a day off related to my recovery, it's like priority. She makes it happen. She's a recovery ally. She supports not just myself, but the things that are happening in our community. And get friends from school in early recovery looking for a part-time job. She's like, yes, absolutely. I'll be happy to give this man an interview. Sit down, interview him. She loves him, right? Like he's not the person he is on paper.
Sure.
Go through the hiring process, submit the background check. Corporate says no. We ask for special consideration. They say no. What do? You know, corporate's based out of Houston, Texas.
Right.
They could care less about a little dude over here in Western North Carolina. Like, I don't know, I don't know what's the next step. Like, how do you advocate at a higher level to even just,
You know, it's the danger of trying to find employment, you know, as a felon. It's absolutely who you know. You know, obviously, if you stay in that, I mean, I have friends that are felons, but if the only people you know that are felons, you kind of get stuck in that way of thinking in that circle. When you're a felon, the majority of the jobs that you're going to get, especially as a drug felon, I shouldn't say majority, but from my experience, you're going to be working in other facilities with other drug felons that had the same prior issues as yourself. You're putting yourself at risk to be exposed to that behavior again, and it's just it's a difficult. I had it happen to me. You know, I was right back into the mix of where I didn't need to be at, but it was because I couldn't find a job due to my felony, and it looked, you know, and my work record sucked too. So
yeah. And talking to Phillip Cooper on here,
yes,
they do. You know, Asheville has some fair resources through the Justice Resource Center, and they do have relationships with certain employers. That's a lot of what Mr. Cooper does is kind of facilitates that handoff. If you're truly willing to, if you're truly on the right track of changing your life and you're committed to doing that, he goes to bat for you. He's kind of like an advocate.
sure.
But in talking to him on this podcast, we were talking about like that process, and he was like, the first thing that I ask these individuals when they come to me is, who's your sponsor? what kind of step work are you doing? What does your recovery look like? And I get into that first. And if I think that they're a good candidate, then I'll go to the table for them. But there's not a Phillip Cooper in every city in this country that's,
Right.
Sure.
doing that work and willing to do that. And I think it's so valuable because you never know what Ricky Johnson who's the next Ricky Johnson. You never know who you're going to run into. And dude, I'm all about second, third, fourth, fifth chances because that's what got me here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was way more than a second chance that got me to this table, just like you. Veteran community.
Sure.
Out in Asheville, what is it like working, coming from where you came from and going through what you went through, and then now being able to go into the courtroom and advocate for these guys and have those personal relationships and be a role model to so many of those guys that come through there? What's it like?
Gratifying, humbling. In my prior life, I never thought I'd be involved in the recovery community, much less back in the veteran community. And here I am, in the mix of it.
Both, a leader in both communities.
I never thought, it's every time I go in the courtroom, it's for one, it humbles me. It lets me know how quick my life can change from one bad choice. I can be right back in there on the opposite side again. I'm working with the judge. I work in the judge's the vicinity. It's working with law enforcement. Never thought I'd be doing that, and it's great. I love it.
What about the relationships with the gentleman coming through treatment court?
We have a good relationship. I think the benefit that I have as a mentor is I'm able to relate to them on a level where a lot of people can't, just with the military experience and being in the justice system. They know they can't BS me, and that keeps we keep it very, very open and honest with one another. So.
Yeah. How do you establish trust with them, and then how do you hold them accountable?
Very simple. I spoke about this today. A very simple way. Main thing is listen. Okay, listen, encourage, have compassion, talk about accountability and consequence. And when my talking about consequence and accountability is not just some hearsay bullshit. It's actually here. This is I was there. I've been to prison. You haven't yet. You don't want to get. It's not. You've got a chance in this. You have a chance in veterans court.
Mm-hmm. How do you do it from a place of love, though? How do you because
Sure.
I think that's what leads to trust.
Sure.
Is to know that you're coming at it from a non-authoritative, non-judgmental, hey,
Sure.
I'm however it is you need to approach it, but I'm doing it because I care
Sure.
about you, because I see you as an individual the same way that Julie saw you. You see those cats.
Absolutely. Same way she did for me. I listen. Whatever they're going through, first and foremost, I listen to them because I want them to know that they matter and I care about what they're going through. I let them talk, and whatever they're going through, I validate it. Hey, brother. Hey, Stephen. You have a reason to feel that way, and we're going to get through this. I want them to know that they're not the first person to go through it. They're not going to be the last, but they could be one of the few to come out of it and be a better person for it. I may sound a little gruff in a video, but never would I'm not somebody that's going to chew somebody's ass. I mean, I'm just real, and I have compassion and
I think he has
encourage them.
empathy.
Empathy,
too.
yeah, that's a good word.
Empathy from experience.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't make it about me. I'm not the kind of person that tries to give advice. I don't. Well, you went through that. Well, this is what I went through. If I can do it, you can do it. I'm not that guy. I'm like, hey, we're a team.
Let's do this together.
Yeah.
What's been the most difficult part of this whole entire process of recovery? What's been your most challenging moment?
Losing my son by far. Yeah.
What happened?
Through my addiction, that was my priority. My priority was substance use. I put everything in front of him. I put people in front of him
just like you mentioned at the beginning of this podcast that you experienced and kind of witnessed a lot of it, he did as well.
Yes, through me.
Through you.
Yeah, and I swore to myself I would never, like I said, my biological dad wasn't a bad man, but I swore I would never, put substance use in front of my kid. Like I had it done to me from my biological dad. And I felt I did the same thing. And I had my son on drug deals with me. I got high in front of my son. I let him smoke weed in front of me. I had him watch the door for me while I would sell dope. Just a bunch of very backwards ways of thinking. I was justifying in my mind. I was teaching him how to do the wrong thing the right way. I put substance use over him for many years. I stole from him to get high. Always telling him I'm gonna get it together. I'm sorry, and things like that. And I paid for it. I carry a lot of guilt for that. It'd be easy for me to say, he made his own choice, but I'm his dad, man. I impacted his life in a negative way.
He looked up to you.
Absolutely.
And the behaviors that you were doing weren't in line with the way that you wished he would have lived.
He knew he was old enough to know that he still loved me. He still looked up to me no matter what I did, but obviously I was living a very, chaotic, toxic life. And, he saw 3 good years of me after I met Julie. But, when he passed, he took his own life. He was 18. It knocked the piss out of me,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you guys have a good relationship in those 3 years? Did you
We
spend
did.
some?
It was a lot better. I started gaining his trust back, but it was unfortunate that I started watching him struggle, and there wasn't a lot I could do about it.
With drugs or mental health disorders?
Mental health. He was, him and his girlfriend they broke up. He started having mental health issues. I was just coming out of my transition transitioning to who I am now. My way of thinking was, he started talking about taking his own life, and I told him, I said, if you think that'll help something, then do it. Effing do it, That was the way that's my way of thinking. It didn't happen until 3 years later, but it's a thought of, I can't believe I said that, I still carry that with me.
When you got the news, that was the first thing that you probably went back to was
Sure.
that you said that.
Yeah, I think about it often, And like I said, his life, it killed me, but it inspired me. I decided like I mentioned the prayer that I prayed. I'm like, I'll never doubt you when things don't go my way. I didn't ask God why me. I'm not a pity guy. My son made a bad choice, but it inspired who I am now. It definitely humbled me.
Yeah.
You know.
I'm sorry, man.
That's
It's
okay.
a difficult situation, and
Yeah.
I commend you for coping with it in the most healthiest ways, and like being where you are today after experiencing such a loss in recovery and somewhat still early recovery.
And even with Julie, she's a therapist, and she can tell you for her, she still explain to him how it impacted you, babe, with the Landon situation.
Well, it was difficult, because I felt like I had to maintain my composure in order to be there for him, because he was so early in recovery too. There was a lot of potential for it to go disastrously bad, right? So I knew that I needed to be able to maintain myself, and which took a lot of self-care. But then also, it was challenging because once we moved to Lake Ozark, Missouri, away from our hometown, I was working with teen boys that had experienced developmental trauma in their past, and saw a lot of Landon in them at times, which was really challenging for me. So I would have to, a lot of times, just go to my office and just emotionally just break down and just let it be what it was and be in the emotion for a minute, get myself back together and go back out and start, providing the therapy to the boys again. But it was challenging. It was really challenging.
I think the best way she worded it to me was I always thought about all the, he left me a letter, told me he was proud of me, and I always thought of the bad things that I did.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't a mean person. I just did, really selfish stuff. And she told me one day, she said, babe, you could have been, you're blaming yourself because of all the bad things you've done, but you could have been the perfect parent. Then you would ask, what did I do wrong,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's about how you look at the
Sure.
situation, and absolutely, like, living the way that you did it influence the way that he thought? Probably.
Sure.
But did seeing the transformation of Ricky also influenced the way that he thought and saw the world? Absolutely, dude. Just I'm sure it's just one of those things that we talk about in recovery, but like those questions in life that we'll never have the answers to.
Sure.
How do we find peace in that? How do we find acceptance and even just like tolerance in those painful, unanswerable moments?
And even as bad as it hurts me still, and I hate to use it in this way, but it's been an ace in the hole for me as far as being able to talk to people about like, hey, this is what I did, and this is what I'm paying for, or if somebody's even thinking about taking their own life, I'm able to get on that level with them, and it's not worth it,
Yeah. But that's also a part of kind of taking the responsibility
Yes.
for your actions. I mean, if you're going to take responsibility for your actions, that's the biggest one, whether you're doing it from a place of compassion or from a place of guilt and shame. And it sounds like you've come at it from a place of compassion
Yes.
and forgiveness.
And the main thing, a lot of it I use is with individuals that still in substance use and addiction. I'm like, hey man, God forbid you ever have to look at your kid in the casket like I did, and you think about all that time you invested into these people that don't give a shit about you. And this life is just this whole life is an illusion, but the consequence is absolutely real. You don't want to carry this, and I use that. That's what and it's because it's reality, and that's something I speak about a lot also.
How do you forgive yourself?
Oh man, I can't always. There's days I'm mad at myself. I hurt.
But that's you being vulnerable again right now.
Sure.
Right? And that's this practice of forgiveness is so temporary, just like every other feeling and emotion. And we'll have good days and bad days. And there's days where, I don't have a resentment in the world. And there's days where I hate myself.
Sure.
And it's all about like, how do I shift that relationship with myself so that when I do have these self-doubting, guiltful, shame-filled moments, I can recognize it and then respond to those in the healthiest way. But again, that's a skill and a practice and something that that you have to figure out for yourself.
Sure.
Like, how do I do that? And what?
And when I talk about with his decision to take his own life, there's people that tell me, Ricky, it's not your fault. And, I know they mean well, but I try to explain to people, man, what you're exposed to, what you see and what you hear, it absolutely impacts who you become. It can be bad or good. So he saw a lot of me in a negative way. I mean, I can't help but. And I may go a month or two and be at peace with his decision and think, at least he's not here in this world dealing with all this crazy crap going on. But then I might be riding down the road one day and listen to a song and it just devastates me. So,
But then you go on Facebook and you tell everybody, I've seen it.
yeah.
A part of it is just like, so much of my life as a young man, teenager, and young adult, I did not, no matter what my parents, I had a close relationship with my parents, and no matter what they tried to teach me, I just did not know. Like the most valuable skill that I possess right now that I did not possess back then is how to relate to my emotions. And I would just get stuck on these like what you just described could have been any one of us with your son, because I just did not have healthy relationship with negative emotions or uncomfortable feelings. No matter what my parents taught me, no matter what my counselor said, there was just, I don't know. And I don't know how to teach that. I learned through my spirituality and through my meditation practice that as a 35-year-old man, not as an 18 or 20-year-old kid, I would be a different person had I had those skills back then. And so that's one of the things that I always think about is how do we influence that? My girlfriend has a 5-year-old son, right? How do I teach him those skills now so that when he gets into middle school and he gets into high school, he'll have a set of skills to turn to when self-hatred and shame and guilt come up, because it's going to come up, whether it's through drugs or relationships or whatever. Those things are going to happen. How do I teach them that? And I don't know what the answer is. I don't.
It's just unfortunate that most of our skills and our lessons are learned through going through hell.
Learn the hard way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do we have to learn the hard way?
Yeah.
Julie, what you are a counselor, a therapist?
Yeah.
What kind of work do you do?
Well, right now I work at Behavioral Health Group, and I'm a program director and a therapist there for medication-assisted treatment for opiates.
Okay. How did you get into the helping field? What was it about?
Gosh, it's interesting because I started out in business, and I actually got a job back in our hometown in prevention, drug and alcohol prevention, and because of my past addiction, I thought, well, maybe this is an opportunity for me to give back in some way. Maybe that's why I went through that at such a young age, So I thought, okay, I'll try this. I'll see what it's like. Well, it was challenging because I was going into the schools, doing prevention talks and education, kind of like what we had in school whenever we were there. And, when the person comes in and you're kind of sitting there whenever you're the person in addiction and you're going, yeah, I don't believe anything you're saying.
Yeah.
This is
That's
all a bunch
not
of
me.
garbage,
No way.
Yeah.
And that's like the miracle answer is
Right.
like, how do we teach it in a way that they can receive the message and
Right.
understand the consequences
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
a young age?
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of how I started. And then they needed a counselor. And so they said, surprise, basically, we're going to send you to these classes and you're going to become a counselor. And I was like, what? You can do that? Like, I thought you had to have an education for that. And they're like, well, you're going to get the education in substance abuse. So that's where you're going to start out. And once I started out in counseling, I really enjoyed it. It was like, I knew that was where I was supposed to be, even though it was challenging at times. So there was times whenever I thought, I cannot do this. You'd have a really challenging patient or whatever, and it was like, I just don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I've got it in me. But it was growth, it was like our challenges we have as individuals.
Let me stop her real quick. Julie, she quit school, high school, acquired her GED, went back and got 2 master's degrees while raising 2 daughters and working full time.
So yeah.
And she still has an addiction. It's me.
I know. I seen her stalking you in the gym.
Yeah.
I seen her stalking you in the
I do.
gym.
I stalk him.
Yeah. But yeah, I definitely, I look up to her for being able to accomplish all of that.
Huge.
Huge, yeah.
Huge.
And she would never tell you, but that's something I brag about because it's a big deal. So she's very humble.
Yeah. It was surviving, though. It's like you said, for so long, you run from your emotions. And I was raised by a guy that, no vacations. He was a farmer, and he worked constantly. It's all he did, So I was raised in that survival mode. This is how you find value in you. And if you don't do this, then you're not valuable. And, so it was like, you're going to do this no matter what. So there was definitely a drive there. But at the same time, there was no, like, let's stop and feel for a while, It was still, even though I wasn't an addiction at that point, it was an addiction. You know what I mean? It was just a different way of distracting my mind from feeling and being in the moment. So it took me a long time to get to that place.
So just imagine this beautiful woman with 2 master's degrees, but grew up on a farm. She can drive a tractor. She raised cattle and she can castrate pigs. All those things.
And a Midwest boy like you, man, there ain't no turning back from that.
Yeah, she taught me. I didn't even know how to drive a tractor. We were on her dad's farm, and she's on there grinding gears. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. What brought you guys to Asheville?
Babe,
Yeah, my job with Behavioral Health Group.
the opiate epidemic.
Yeah. I knew a person that was down here that was already, involved in that field, and they needed help. So that's what brought me down here.
And Ricky
Yeah.
came with it.
Came with us. I told her, I said,
Didn't know what he was going to
I
do.
had no clue. Like I said, I had that goal and I had a vision, but no plan. And came with the 2 felonies, and started networking.
How long after you landed here did you land at NC SERS?
It was a little bit, wasn't it?
I was unemployed for probably 3 or 4 months, and you know that time I used it. The time I was unemployed, that's when social media, I used it to my advantage. That's when I contacted the news station where I'm from, and they ran an 8-minute story over my life. Because of social media. So I used it wisely.
And they ran it back home.
Mm-hmm.
What was it?
It was just the redemption of Ricky Johnson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted you to say it.
Yeah.
What was the piece like? What did they do? They came here and interviewed you?
No, I went back home
Yeah.
for a weekend, and we went back to the jail one of the jails I was locked up in.
One of his friends, hometown people.
It was pretty cool. Yeah. And that story has actually been nominated for a national and state award. So that's been pretty cool.
The redemption of Ricky Johnson.
Yeah.
What do you see on the future for you, man?
Still, right now I'm getting my supervision for my CSAC.
Kick ass.
That's coming up.
Uh-huh.
I'm speaking in front of the governor in June of North Carolina, the governor's working group. Still doing the radio once a month. Actually, I probably shouldn't say this today, but I'm going to. I met some people through NC Works or NC Serves who we work with, and they asked me, or Brandon asked me to tell them my story, and they invited me to Manhattan to speak.
Oh, hell yeah.
To New York. So that's probably going to be coming up soon. Same stuff, man. Staying busy, staying humble.
What's the radio deal? Because we kind of brushed
Sure.
over that real quick at the beginning.
It's a 103.
And then how can people catch it?
It's a 103.7 WPVM in Nashville. Poplar Bluff's where we moved from. It's I don't have the schedule, but it's once a month. It's NC Serves Western and ABCCM. We just highlight our providers, talk about the veteran community. This month is National Women's Appreciation Month, so we're highlighting female veterans. Every month it's just something different. It could be people that NC Serves has benefited, somebody like me or other veterans.
Cool.
It gives the community an awareness of how to better support veterans and what's going on.
It's definitely a needed service in the community. Hit your Facebook page. You always post, and NC Serves always posts when you guys are going on the air. Julie, harm reduction. You moved to Asheville, start doing harm reduction, methadone clinic, needle exchange services, stuff like that.
We don't do the needle exchange
No.
services, but we do link them up with resources so they can do that.
Mm-hmm. What's the difference in the recovery scene here in Asheville compared to where you guys come from in Missouri?
I would say that there's a lot more heroin here. Back home, it was more meth. There was some heroin, but not. It was more pain pills, which here there seems to be more heroin. There's still the addiction to the pain pills that sometimes leads people into the heroin addiction, but definitely back home it was more pain pills, at least at that time.
What about like recovery? You see?
More abstinence-based back then. Back there where we lived. Not a lot of education on the need for it.
When you moved here, harm reduction was somewhat of a new.
It was, yeah. Although, back home, whenever I was still working in substance use and prevention and counseling, it was just starting to come to the surface where, hey, maybe we should do some harm reduction. And, but it was taboo. It was like, I don't know, though. That's like switching one drug for another. That's not going to fix anything. But people didn't really understand that we could use more of a step-down model, to really help people.
Yeah, and the research shows the benefits.
And I was one of the people that was absolutely against.
Yeah.
You're switching one thing to another, but the more I've been opened up to it and educated about it, I can see the benefit that it has for some people.
Yeah.
So I mean, if somebody can go get a dose at a clinic and get counseling, that keeps them from going out robbing and stealing.
You're alive.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
Absolutely.
Period. We just talked about what it was like to experience the loss of your son.
Sure.
And you're alive.
Yep.
That next breath is an opportunity to find recovery.
Absolutely.
That's what it boils down to.
And I never use the word. I try to avoid using the word never within recovery, but guys, if you're listening, you know, the longer you stay in it, the harder it is to come up out of it. You know, because the older we get, the more set in our ways we get, the less likely we are to take guidance. Obviously, any time you use it, you're closer to death or closer to going to prison. You know, so I don't like to use the word never, but the longer we stay in it, it's just, you know, it's harder to come up out of.
And like, I mean, we're about the same age. I talked a lot about like, you know, finding recovery in my mid 30s. Like, a lot of like the guilt and shame that it was the hardest for me to work with is the loss of time, the decades of my nieces and nephews being born and holding them as babies and having relationships with them. It's like there's 15 years that Steve wasn't present.
You hit it on the head.
And so like what would have happened if I found recovery at 22? What would I be doing today? You know, like, and that's just things that I think about. But you also talked about like finding it later in life. It can be somewhat difficult at times. I can vividly remember driving up here after getting fired from my job and driving up my little mountain road just to get away because I was so mad for losing my job when it was my fault. But I was blaming the employer and I was blaming all these other people in my life. So I ran away from it. And I came out to where I'm living now, the little cabin. And I can like vividly remember like having this, you know, literally lost everything. Job, my home, girlfriend. All I had was my truck left. And I can remember driving up my little mountain road and just like reflecting on my life. And I was intoxicated at the time, but just like reflecting on my life. And like there wasn't the thought of changing did not cross my mind. I was thinking about what I just described about not having relationships with the nieces and nephews and my brother and not being present in their lives and the people who loved me and should be involved in my life and not having that relationship. And the only thing that I felt was acceptance. I accepted that I would be a lifelong alcoholic and a lifelong drug user. And I just could I vividly remember, and this was 2012, 7 years ago. I mean, I vividly remember just driving in my truck up this little road, just thinking like, okay, well, this is what my life is. I am and always will be a career, lifelong user. And like the thought of stopping never even crossed my mind. And it, I mean, recovery was accessible. Like I had supports in my life, but it just didn't, it wasn't there. And that was the acceptance. It was like, okay, this is who I am. This is where I'm at. This is what my life is.
And it, you know, you mentioned, you know, like, and another part of the longer you stay in it, man, that guilt and that shame just piles on. And that's another reason I'm open with people, is let them know, hey man, it's okay that you've done it. Or it happens. You know, you don't have to stay in it. There's a way out of there. You know, you don't have to keep doing it, because the longer you let that stuff pile on, it'll weigh you down. And some people never come out of it.
There's just so much. There's so much fear of like initiating that change, and that's why like I think the harm reduction stuff is so valuable, because like Julie's clients have a relationship with Julie, so when they have experienced those consequences or they have experienced those thoughts, like if I just shared with you in your office what I was thinking and feeling, you could have totally rephrased that to like, well, you know, this is what is available. You're not a lifelong whatever, you're a person, and da 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 da. And that's just like planting those seeds that you talked about. I don't know, man. It's just, I think about this stuff all the time, and it's just like, I don't know what the answers are.
No, I
ask these questions on the show, and I just don't know.
I was talking to a guy I mentor today, and where I was reflecting on, you know, I'm a clean guy, and I was thinking about all the places that I've laid my head before, you know, just the smell of piss and just filth, and I lay there looking up thinking, how the hell did I end up here? You know, I look back at that, and that's something I think I still reflect on, that I never want to go back to that again. The thought of it repulses me, you know, and I know how quick it can happen.
And how quick you can go back there.
Absolutely.
Man. How quick you can go back there. I think you hit it on the head with like just taking responsibility for your actions, because it was something that I was just avoided at all costs. You know, like there was no. I wanted to ask you about something. I saw a post that you made a week ago, a couple days ago.
Okay.
National Women's Day post.
Yes.
Mary Jane.
Oh yeah, Mary Jane, if you're listening, I love you.
Who's Mary Jane? What kind of role did she have in your life?
Huge role. Mary Jane's my stepmother. When my dad, Pop, my stepdad, when he married Mary Jane, I kind of gave her hell. You know, I was in a bad. I'd steal from them. I was disrespectful. I'd get high in their house. I was just not a good person. Well, it come to the point in my life when my son wanted to come live with me, and if it wasn't for Mary Jane, my son would not have clothes. He wouldn't have had food. I mean, I failed as a father, but she was always there for him. And you know, no matter what I did, she loved me still, and she forgave me. Now we're really close now. She forgave me, and it took a while, you know. But she's one of my biggest fans. I don't like to use the word fan, but she's
You got a lot of fans, bro. I hate to tell you that.
she's one of my biggest supporters. So I appreciate her. You know, she's a good woman for sure.
Awesome. I don't know if I got anything else, man.
I'm glad you had us today. Appreciate it,
dude. I'm glad that you came back. In the short period of time that I've known you, I would say that it's been pretty amazing just to see from like a distance, to see this kind of, and I didn't know the old Ricky. I only know this funny and honest. I love his sense of humor, man. He cracks me up, but this funny and honest and vulnerable guy.
Let me say this real quick.
Yeah.
You said you don't know the old Ricky, but when I took my wife home to meet my family, they would all come up to her and go, "How in the hell did you do this? Like, what happened?" You know, they all knew the hell on wheels, Ricky. So we'll go ahead and finish. Yeah.
But it's been amazing just to see you kind of like step into this role. And like you talked about like taking responsibility for your actions and being honest and vulnerable, but like you really have settled into this role with like a sense of like authenticity, to where that like you talk to you privately, publicly, watch a video, private conversation, like there's no questioning the authenticity. And that's what's like we were talking about in early recovery and building that trust and things like that, is that it has to come from somebody that is truly in it for the right reasons. And that's what, like, I always thought that like those individuals who were trying to sell recovery were just like full of shit, you know, like they didn't have anything in common with me, whether they were in recovery themselves or not. They just didn't have anything in common with me. But when in talking with you and getting to know you, it is from like a genuine sense of kindness, and a totally authentic perspective. So
I've had Brandon Wilson's been a huge mentor to me, a huge impact. You know, he's no question I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for his guidance. And
how come I didn't see you running in that race with him this weekend, man?
Brandon can have those races.
You're a weight guy.
I'm not a runner. I used to run a lot, but not anymore. But Brandon's been Brandon and NC Serbs and ABCCM is, you know, I wouldn't be here today. You know, Brandon's he's by far the best leader that I've ever had. It's just as far as grooming you for greatness. I mean, but he holds me accountable. You know, we have that relationship. He's like a brother to me, but he holds me accountable too. So I appreciate him.
Well, you're a badass. For real. I feel privileged to call you a friend and know you, and look forward to getting to know you even further.
Same to you, brother.
How can people get a hold of you to get a hold of these videos? You should start a YouTube channel, man.
You know, I tried that once, but people were talking shit to me on there. So
on YouTube?
Yeah. So
You're a different person today, Ricky Johnson.
So I have to turn the comments off.
Turn the comments off.
You can find me on Facebook, Ricky Johnson Jr. It's pretty simple.
He's this guy right here, Ricky Johnson Jr. on Facebook. Start a YouTube channel. Download your videos from Facebook, just the Facebook Live videos, and just take that same video and throw it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Do it, bro. I'm telling you. And you know what, man? start a podcast. That's what you need to do with this time. Take these videos and just start a podcast. So many people do it. They don't have to do it. It doesn't have to be this format with like guests and people coming in and fancy equipment. Like you could literally do the same thing you do with your Facebook videos and make them into podcasts. Super easy, dude. People want to hear what you have to say. They do. For real.
I appreciate it.
Thank y'all for tuning in to NC Raw. Y'all have a wonderful night. We will catch you on Friday night. We got a special episode Friday night with Chris Campow, addiction professionals in North Carolina, director of like collegiate recovery. He's in charge of the all the collegiate recovery programs across the state. He kind of like provides resources and things like that. So awesome cat. Looking forward to having a conversation with him. Hit up Ricky Johnson on Facebook. You got to check out his videos. Julie, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll talk soon.